Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome back to the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad, your favorite podcast for learning how to balance between being a functional adult and a raging dumpster fire. Some days we're all a bit of a dumpster fire. Joining me today is Chloe Muscord. Chloe, thank you so much for coming on today. I know I'm excited to chat with you. I know the audience is gonna love. But before we get too far into today's episode, can you just give us a little bit about your background, where you're from, how you got into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to be here and share a few little nuggets of wisdom with your audience. So appreciate the time. So I am an online intimacy coach and speaker. A lot of people will ask me how I got into the space of what I'm doing now, which is quite interesting. It wasn't something that I, grew up always being super interested in, but I've always been a really curious person and really love to explore and understand things by experiencing them myself. And, we all go through that period of when we grow up that we're a little bit explorative with, our sexuality and our bodies. And I think during that time, I realized how much shame was attached to our sexuality. And I think it has improved slightly over time. But where this career kind of came into play for me was around loving to have conversations like today about the more taboo topics that most people don't often have. And I think by normalizing conversations about relationships and intimacy, I think the impact that that can have on people's joy and happiness and connection is hugely beneficial. So for me to be able to work in that space and to enhance people's lives, because the relationship that we have with our partner is one that is so pivotal for our happiness and satisfaction in life. That was where I ended up in this space and why it's so important on my heart as well.
Well, I loved what you said earlier, and I wholeheartedly agree that when we talk about topics that are deemed quote unquote taboo and we start to normalize them, that we really do create a space in ourselves and in our culture for people to lead more complete and fulfilling lives, especially around sexuality, identity. All those things are really important. Why hide those parts of ourselves when we should be sharing them?
Agreed. Absolutely. And I think if we look at what I have a lot of clients come to me with is, that there's real problems in their relationship and challenges in their relationship, which is often stemmed from lack of communication. And because these topics are so taboo and we've never really been taught how to have conversations about intimacy and relationships growing up, some people have, which is great, but often then we haven't had a good guide or role model to show us what is okay and what's not. And so therefore there's a lot of avoidance when it comes to difficult conversations around relationships and sex and intimacy. And I think it's really sad because often that can be the reason why relationships fail is because there's simply no communication or it's gone too long without communication. And it can be resolved. You're in this space of relationships. It's something that can, with some simple techniques and strategies for the individual, it can actually be something that we can support somebody with and help them enjoy the relationship they're in or find a relationship that serves them better, and have a lot more pleasure in their lives, which is what I'm a huge advocate for.
Yeah. I believe that we all should be experiencing the best feelings all the time. And that's not to say that we're going to avoid lows. There's just so much room and opportunity for us to both grow and feel amazing. It's been a while since I've had you take your passports out. This is an international episode. It's not the microphone glitching. You might hear a little bit of a difference in accents. So you are literally on the other side of the world from us over here in the state. Where are you currently located right now?
So I'm in Queensland in Australia in a beautiful little town called Noosa, which is it's beachside. It's got a lot of nature. It's just a really beautiful place to live and I feel really blessed to be here. I didn't grow up here, sadly. I love it. It's sunshine most of the year round and today feels very cold for me. I don't know if you know Celsius, but it's the lowest it was 10 degrees Celsius, which feels freezing for me.
I can relate. Today has been one of the chilliest and rainy days over here in Nashville. I thought that we were going to have a flood. Like if you would have heard the outside like 5, 10 minutes like ago, you would have been like, are you sure your house isn't gonna fall apart? But I'm jealous. I was like, beachside, all we have are trees and more trees and some rock. That's what we got here.
Yeah. I'll have to send you a photo after this episode, but anyone that's listening, Google Noosa, Queensland, Noosa, and you'll be. I feel blessed every day to be here. I'm so grateful I made it happen finally, but it is such a beautiful place. If you ever come to Australia, please come and visit and hit me up. I'll take you around and show you.
Of course, we've already started making the 2025 not so bad like travel list. I
Perfect.
was like, we can easily hit Australia on there. Listen, anywhere that has sun and clear water, a-okay in my book. A-okay. I didn't bring you on just to talk about how amazing Australia is, how beautiful it is. We are actually going to have some, I think, quality content for you. One of the reasons I brought Chloe on is because I think we both, like we were talking about, are big advocates for pleasure, but we're also huge advocates for raw and genuine conversation. So we start all episodes off pretty much the same way. This is called the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad or Bachelorette, you know. So I have to ask, are you currently partnered, unpartnered? What's your relationship status like right now?
Yeah, so I'm in a relationship. I'm getting all nervous. That's exciting. So I've been in a relationship with my current partner for about 4 or 5 months now. So we're early days, which has been really interesting because this is the first time since I started my new career that I was dating, which was interesting. I did keep my profession a little bit low key in the beginning stages of dating because, you know, people need to earn that ability to understand what I'm doing. I want to make sure that people's intentions are for the right reasons. Yeah, the beautiful man that I'm dating now, you know, it's been a really cool experience. I'm very happy. He's very different to, you know, previous partners. There was quite a consistent trend prior to this person, but I think it's really interesting how post relationship we have the ability to, or even dating, we have the ability to reflect on what worked and what didn't and what we want in a partner. And I spent quite a lot of time after the ending of my engagement last year. I was able to reflect and really get clear on what it was that was important to me as a value in my partner moving forward. And, you know, I know a lot of people harp on about, you know, values alignment and things like that. For me, in the past, I maybe knew what I wanted from a partner, but it was also about reflecting what are the values that I'm bringing to the relationship. For example, like humor. It's you know, one of those things where it's in a very attractive quality, but you both don't have to be funny. So I mean, I'll take that value.
So often we have our own little like shopping list of what we're trying to tick off,
Yeah.
but are we really paying attention to, but how are we making ourselves appealing to somebody else? I would love to have a partner who's just as funny as I am because I'm hilarious, but I understand sometimes that might have to be the role that I carry too. Yeah, but going back, so you've kind of had a big year. You said the end of last year you were kind of exiting a long-term situation.
Yeah.
I don't want to pry, but yes, I do. If we're gonna be authentic, we're gonna be authentic. So how long was it between the end of your last relationship and you getting into this one?
This is actually quite a funny story. So there was no overlap. Just let's get that clear.
I'm not here to judge.
Definitely not. Definitely not. But that relationship, which I'll talk about in a sec, the ending of that relationship, you know, obviously there was a lot to process coming to the end of that relationship and a few things that once we get out of the relationship, we go, oh, holy shit. You know, like, oh my God, there was a lot of things that I didn't see because I was in it and my emotions were invested and maybe things that I didn't want to see, you know, things I look at a lot of my partners through a really positive lens. And as nice as that is, it's also can be detrimental because you can sometimes ignore things that need to be really looked at. Coming out of that relationship, there was a few things to unpack. And I was spending some time doing that, obviously also getting my ducks in a row, and I had to move out of the property. And there was, you know, a lot of other things that I needed to organize. He slid into my DMs essentially. He
Listen,
said, I'm just going to shoot my shot. And I was like, okay, is that what the kids are saying these days? So there was some good banter back and forwards there. But it's really funny. Initially, I thought it was a stitch up because the day before I had deleted, all photos of my ex off my social media. And then it was literally the next day. And I was like, this is a little bit sus.
Is this convenient or is
Yeah.
something at play here? No,
Yeah. It was a little bit of conversation back and forwards, and he lives in the same place I live in. It's quite small here. So
Okay.
it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, I've been here 3 years and we've never met or come across each other. And it seems, quite interesting that we hadn't crossed paths. There were some messages back and forwards. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, I feel like you're catfishing me. I need to actually see you in person because this is one of my friends has been super protective of me. And she's like, do you think there's any possibility that this could be like a stitch up? And I started to come a little bit.
Yes.
And I said, right, that's it. No more chats. We're meeting up in person. And then sure enough, he was a real person, which was, not setting the bar pretty low, but obviously after that, there was a lot of things that I needed to feel like we were a good match. So that progressed very slowly. And I think that was a good thing as well, because there was no rush. There was no, I needed to make sure that I was in a good headspace to pursue something. And we took, quite a while to get to a point where there was even, conversations about a relationship. So it was good. It was different. Normally I'm like head straight into a situation. And previously the engagement was, I don't want to label something, but I'm going to say there was a love bombing situation that happened in the beginning of that engagement. And it was very whirlwind. It was a lot.
I will always be the firmest believer of a slow burner. I was like, we could hit it off like nothing else. But I believe it takes time to actually build something quality. And I was like, just because I like you as a person doesn't mean that you're the right fit for me as a partner. You're right. There's nothing wrong with taking your time, feeling things out, seeing if the compatibility is high enough and the quote unquote vibes are good enough to invest.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that completely. And I think the question that I was asking was, reflecting back on that whole stage of love bombing and, whirlwind stuff was, that was filling a void in somebody. Like that was somebody was needing something to be filled in within themselves, as opposed to it being a genuine connection. It was somebody else's fear of being alone. And also at that point for me, I would rather have had the company than, no one. So it was just like these needs or unresolved things within ourselves brought us together, and we're filling voids, as opposed to it being a genuine connection with two people that should be together. And that's not a good start at all.
Codependency is a very dangerous game. And anybody who's listened to the show knows my philosophy on I never want to have a better half, but I wouldn't mind having a twin flame, a partner in crime, somebody who's complete without me.
Absolutely. So important. Yeah, that it doesn't increase your value by having somebody in your life. It's like adding to your life and, bringing more happiness, not making you happy. And I'm very conscious about language these days. We're saying, not you complete me or you make me really happy. It's like you bring happiness to my life. You bring joy to my life, not you make me happy.
100%. Because even if we don't realize it right away, that's a huge burden to bear for any person, for any relationship, is being solely responsible for somebody's happiness or joy. What happens when I have a bad day?
In particular, if you're a people pleaser, right? Like if you naturally, and I have that from my childhood, like I'm people pleaser back in the day, 101. And even in that previous relationship with the engagement, like it was all about the other person. So it's not serving anyone if you're feeling that weight and heaviness and taking somebody else's emotional state and happiness and joy on your shoulders. That doesn't serve the relationship. It creates resentment and it doesn't it's not an enjoyable experience for you if you feel like it's your responsibility.
I could only imagine how that affected not just your mental, but your physical as well. I feel like when there's so much obligation on you and your role in a relationship, that could not just weigh on your communication, but even your intimacy, like how intimate you are with each other, because
Yeah.
your emotional bank is probably close to being overdrawn at times.
Absolutely. My nervous system was, and it has been in every, I would say almost every relationship up until, this point. And even now I'm going through challenges of breaking that down, breaking that patterning down where being in a relationship can bring up stuff that needs to be resolved. That's what relationships do. It shows you where you need to lean in and consider some opportunity for evolution. So yeah, it's an interesting thing being in a relationship. And I think for me in that previous one, my nervous system was shot to shit. And I tried every health and wellness thing that I possibly could to calm my nervous system. But what the situation was, and we'll bring it back to communication, was we weren't addressing challenges and problems in the relationship in the way that they needed to be addressed. And as a result of that, my body was stressed, wasn't feeling good in my mind, in my body. I was also, I lost my libido, which was a first for me. I'd never been in that situation where I'd ever experienced that drop. That's what I help a lot of clients with these days is, what is the contributor to that low libido? And it can be relationship challenges and problems. It's not just like, oh yeah, it's in the mind and it's just something we need to fix, or the to-do list, it's something on there that we just need to get to. It's not. It really does have an impact on our body as well. And I think that's important for people to know, that your health and your wellness can be impacted by what's going on in your relationship.
Yeah, there are a lot of, like you said, it's not just intrinsic. Sometimes there very well may be some stuff going on literally on the outside that is causing this disparity. But you look fairly young, so I was like, if this is in the past, I was like, that's also says something that's usually atypical of, younger people is, yeah, you're like we're vivacious, we have a lot
Yeah.
of energy. So when there's like a decline, that's usually preemptive of, hey, there might be some other issues that we need to work through.
There can be a whole different range of issues that come up. Some are health related. Some are like, when we talk about menopause and things like that, which is a little bit later in life, like that can be a contributor to, that lack of desire or wanting to be connected or intimate with your partner. But there's a whole range of different things, and unresolved conflict or challenges in the relationship are a contributor to high stress. And there's so many other factors in our lives that can impact our stress levels. And I think that's why it's become more and more of a problem, is because I think as a society, we are more stressed than we ever have been before. And I think that that's a huge contributor to these challenges in relationships around libido and around that physical connection between two people, is because we're just trying to do it all and have it all and be it all. And that's putting so much pressure on ourselves.
Wholeheartedly. I'm all about having your cake and eating it too, but not at the expense of your inner peace. Like self-care is super important, and it's something that we're all really focusing on, not just this year, every year, because like I said, it'll never stop being important. You can't be responsible for somebody else. Your first priority should be to yourself. That way you're being the best partner that you can be. You're open to all the possibilities of love and connection that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That self-care, I know that, there's this, God, self-care, here we go, and self-love, all that stuff. But it's people harp on about it because it's actually a thing.
Yeah,
Like it is, if you don't fill up your own cup first, like you can't pour from an empty cup. It's as simple as that. And the beautiful thing for me about how I was able to get to a point where I realized that the relationship wasn't serving me, and I know that can be scary for some people, is like people avoid looking because they don't want to see what's actually there. But when the timing is right and you start to put yourself first and you start to connect back with your body and you start to connect with your intuition, and you start to connect with self-love and, putting yourself first, what you can actually start to see might be a little bit challenging and confronting, but long term, you're actually going to be so much better off. And I'm not saying that it necessarily is the wrong relationship, but what you can uncover is there might be a story that's blocking you from, leaning into that connection with your partner. There might be some intimacy avoidance, or there might be some stories around sex that you're carrying from back when you were younger, where there's shame connected to it or something like that that's blocking you from experiencing pleasure in general, where, your parents may have told you that work hard and enjoy the fruits of your labor later in life. So there's this block to actually enjoying life in the moment.
Okay,
It
yeah.
can be so many different things that can come up when we start to prioritize ourselves, because we're connecting in with what we're actually feeling, and it's then that we're able to feel that connection with ourselves and who we really authentically are.
And this is something that we talked about with, I guess a couple of days ago, Dr. Eric. He said, I feel like the younger generation, or specifically men, will always choose immediate satisfaction over long term and without thinking of long term consequence. And I kind of agree. I was like, well, sometimes we'll just think this is what we want because it looks flashy, it looks nice, what everybody else thinks, and we'll get into a relationship. And then a month or a few years down the line, we're like miserable because this really wasn't the person you were supposed to be with or the job you were supposed to go with. It looked appealing. You didn't really take the time to think, how would this affect me in the long run? Is this something I can see myself doing for a long time?
I agree. I think that it's a lot more common in younger men, but I'm just going to be fully vulnerable with you here. What I noticed is my previous relationship. So this is another funny story. So my previous partner was 12 years older than me,
Okay.
and my current partner is 8 years younger than me.
So you're just trying to find that Goldilocks spot. I get it,
It's like, okay, that didn't work, so let's go like polar opposite. But what I will say is, yes, there's definitely that tendency from younger men to lean into it's like the visual, like what looks good, what's the trend, how am I going to be accepted, what's going to get me liked the most, or what's going to make me feel worthy. But I honestly think that it doesn't matter about age. The other reason why we lean into that is, what is it that's sitting in you that hasn't been healed? What is that part of you that hasn't been healed? And I think in my experience with that ex-partner there was some underlying stuff going on around being previously bullied, or stuff going on there where it was like I needed to prove to the world that I can get what I want, or I can have, the cool car or the young woman. It's proving something to,
right.
somebody else, as opposed to who you are authentically. It's like this ego thing, and we all do it, but it's like needing validation from external sources.
Right. It is tough because appearances do matter in the sense that, how you present yourself to people shapes a large part of how they think about you. However, that can't be the end all be all because you have to live with you 365, 24/7. I was like, they don't. So honestly, it's like,
Yeah.
in very few cases, what does it matter what other people think? How happy are you with yourself when you look in the mirror, when you're alone with your thoughts? Let me tell you, as somebody who has had their fair share of introverted moments, you spend a lot of time in your head. So you got to make it a magic place because it can turn dark and scary real quick.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. And when clients come to me, in particular when I do my 3-month coaching container with them, so there's this journey that we like to go on, and we bring up different topics and whatever, but majority of the time we spend on how you actually view yourself and how comfortable you are in your skin and how much confidence you have naturally and how good you feel about yourself, because those are huge contributors to how you're showing up in a relationship. And even I have to remind myself sometimes in this new relationship where, it's so exciting to hang out and spend time with the partner and whatever else, but it's equally, if not more important, actually, I take that back, it's more important that you fill your own cup and that you spend time with yourself and that you love your own time and your own company, because that's when it's a slippery slope into that codependency that we kind of spoke about before, where it's like you've got to enjoy yourself, your own time, your own body, and be comfortable in your skin in order to have a healthy relationship.
Like for me, I hate using the word now because people have burnt it out or like turned it into such a thing. But I was like, I do sometimes get an ick when I see couples where their whole identity is just each other, like they're in a couple. Whether it's my friend, whether it's myself, whether it's my partner, I need you to have your own thing. Like if you were always on my case or you always want to be with me, I was like, oh, that's sweet. Like I love spending time with you too, but go do your own thing, please. I never want to sacrifice the person I am, the person that you fell for, and become somebody different. Now, that's not to say that I don't want to grow with you, but part of us growing or even being able to come back together and share these intimate moments is we have space apart so that you can share your day with me. Because if we're together 24/7, I know what happened all day. Like, it's a lot. So I was like, sometimes absence does make the heart grow a little bit fonder.
Honestly, always use that analogy when it comes to creating chemistry in a relationship too. It's so vitally important to create space. I think, in particular, if you're in jobs or roles where you're seeing each other consistently all the time, you don't have that ability to, and separateness, to then have that, I miss that person, or the anticipation of the reconnection, I think is almost more important, is like that excitement,
Yeah.
otherwise it's just the same shit day in, day out. And so sometimes to reestablish chemistry and to create a deeper connection, there really does need to be that like separateness and independence. And I think I can relate with you as well. When somebody is doing their thing and like off, doing a hobby that they love to do, or like doing something that inspires them, it's an extremely attractive quality. Like I find it very sexy when somebody's off doing something that fills their cup, because it shows me that they don't need me. I want them to want me. I want to want them, but the need, that's where it, I think, is the line between.
Like you must have been in my head. You must have like read a note that I had back there because everybody says I want to be wanted. I don't want to be needed. I think that that'll tie back into so many other points that we're going to talk about today. Hopefully during that break you took time and and subscribe to the show because I know you were having a great time because we were talking about some real stuff. But in case you didn't, go ahead and like and subscribe right there. So we were talking earlier about how during your previous relationship, you'd kind of lost your libido. I just want to ask, what were some things that you did within yourself or practices or whatever that really helped you to reignite that part of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. We spoke briefly about it, but low libido can obviously stem from very different places. And
Mhm.
I think for me, it was really important for me to reconnect with my body, because I think that disconnection from my body was what was amplifying the situation, and I was living a lot in my head and not in my body, and in my head and not in my heart. So for me, some of the things that really worked quite well was mindfulness, coming back to the present moment, because I think it's often the case with women that I work with where we struggle to be in the present. We're kind of, feeling either shame or concern about the past, or anxious and stressed about the future. And being in the moment is what can help us really connect with our body. So for me, being present in the moment was really important. I did quite a lot of meditation. I was able to come back to the present moment using that. method. And the other thing that I found that was quite beneficial for me as well was self-pleasure. And I think a lot of women I work with in particular, I use self-pleasure as a method for building arousal. And there's this common belief amongst many people that in particular that have low libido, that we have some sort of quota. So we have like a pleasure or orgasm quota, so that if we have no libido, then we simply can't use that for self-pleasure because we're using it all up. And then we have literally nothing left to give to the relationships. For me, stepping into that place of self-pleasure was really a great way for me to connect back in with my body and take time to spend time with myself. However that looked, it didn't have to be actually physically having sexual pleasure for myself, but it's like, what is bringing me pleasure in my body? What can I do that's going to bring me back to the present moment? So those were some things that really got me back into my body and back into connection with my libido and brought that back in my life.
I'm not ashamed to say this because I tell it to my friends all the time. Is I even said at the start of the show, I was like, you know you better than I know you. But that's only true if you take the time to really get to know and explore yourself inside and out. And like you said, it doesn't have to be necessarily sexual. Even though we did just finish Masturbation Mace, we're all about giving that pleasure, guys. All about it. There are a lot of things that, like, just sensations, thoughts. You know that we talk about starting every morning with not just affirmations, but goals for the day, just taking time throughout your day and just checking in on yourself. You may not know this about me, but one thing that is the question, how are you, really kind of triggers me simply because it's like, I don't want to lie to you, but people just ask it as a reflex. And I was like, sometimes I'm going to say not okay, or I don't know, because you really have to be cognizant of where you're at that day, what's going on in your life if you're going to give an answer.
Yeah, agreed. I really struggle with this too because very much an optimist. So for me to be honest and actually say if I'm not okay, it's like I don't want to admit that I'm not okay because I like to look at things through like a nice little positive, rosy colored glasses
Yeah.
lens. So I love that you're authentic in, if people ask you, it's the right thing to do is to be authentic and to normalize saying, hey, I'm not having a good day, or I slept like shit last night, or I've got this thing that I'm a little bit stressed about. And I think it's a beautiful way to open those conversations with other people. And the people that are right for you will lean in and go, tell me more. What is it that's
Right.
stressing you? Yeah. And those that I don't want to go there will either try to change the subject or they'll lean away or they'll be uncomfortable, but it's not you. It's their own shit that they're not okay with having uncomfortable conversations.
And like I said, our whole goal here is to help us become better versions of ourselves. It starts with us. So if we can't be honest with ourselves when people ask us easy questions like that, what's going to happen when we're in a partnership where we don't know how to adjust to the love bombing, where the communication isn't where it needs to be, where you might have not just low libidos, but mismatched. Wow, that was a tongue twister if I had one. Libidos as well. There are so many things that happen just in our day to day that it starts with us just being honest with ourselves to resolve them.
Yeah, I love what you said as well about understanding ourselves better in that exploration. That's another huge part that I always guide clients on is understanding self first. And and through exploration and asking yourself questions and getting to know yourself on a deeper level, once you do that, then you can take that to your relationship and your partner and share with them what it is that brings you pleasure or what it is that you want more of in your dynamic or that you would like to explore with your partner. But if you don't know that in yourself, most of us don't, how can you put that on your partner or have these expectations if you don't even really know what it is you want? A lot of women will be like, he just doesn't hit the spot or it's not But it's like, but what is that? If you can't communicate or understand what it is that feels good for you, intimacy wise, sexually wise, whatever it is, if you don't understand it, your expectation that somebody's going to get it before you get it is not fair. You have to understand yourself better than anyone else in order to then communicate with your partner what it is you want more or need more of.
And we've talked about this several times on the show, but I think the ideology that stems from an unhealthy place, simply for the fact that each partner that you're with differently, you shouldn't necessarily be bringing baggage or quote unquote experience from the last partner to this relationship because they're two different people. Well, my last girlfriend liked vanilla ice cream, so I brought you vanilla ice cream. Where we're like, but if you just would have asked, I probably would have told you I like buttered pecan or I like, strawberry. And I was like, you're right. I just assumed that if they like it, you should too. But if we're being healthier, I'm also not trying to fall into the same trend I was last time. So hopefully some of the things that my partner is liking are a little different than what I previously had.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. We don't need to put ourselves into a box or to adhere to certain labels and things like that. It's nice and refreshing. And I think this is a beautiful thing that the younger generations are bringing forward, is that we don't have to fall into very black and white categories. Like, this is an opportunity for us to create our own desire and our own vision of what we want. It doesn't have to fit into a label or a box. And I think, one day to the next can be different as well. What's working today might not work tomorrow, and vice versa.
I also believe there's a shift. I believe in previous generations and even in my generation, we put so much value on relationships or being single, and the fact that if you were single or unpartnered, that people almost saw you as a failure, like they were judging you. They'd be like, well, you're not seeing anybody? Like, why not? Or you're not married yet? No kids? And I was like, yeah, no kids. I'm not married. I'm waiting for something that I think is going to bring me fulfillment. I was like, sure, I could be like some of the people that I went to school with and be on my second or third like significant other with 3 kids. But I was like, that just isn't what I wanted. Now, I'm not saying I'm looking for a one and done. I was like, not everybody gets storybook right away, but I believe that there's no rush.
Yeah.
You have until your last breath on this planet to find somebody who is for you, or just not live the life you want to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Another part of that is, like I said, you have to do the intrinsic work to know you want, but you also have to communicate. One of the biggest issues I find with why relationships don't succeed is, for whatever reason, people just can't be honest about what they're looking for. Whether that's a short-term relationship, whether that's a fling, whether they're actually looking to find the one and settle down. Or if you don't know, we start to use this spooky word, casual dating. And that just leads you into a rabbit hole that you don't know how to get out of. So I feel like all those things put together sometimes get in our own way.
Yeah, I agree. I think communication before the dating, even starts, you've got to get off on the right foot. You've got to have strong levels of communication from early days. And a beautiful thing about this current relationship that I'm in is, coming out of the previous one, I certainly wasn't afraid to verbalize my boundaries. And it had to happen in order for me to be like, okay, I need to go into something now, making sure that I'm speaking up for what I will and won't accept. And, that can be when you first start talking before you even meet somebody, if you feel that they're overstepping the mark, which can happen. And I think a lot of people then just put a label on it as a red flag. Okay, cool, next. But the thing is, I think that so many of us avoid difficult conversations or discomfort in general. And the more we practice having really clear communication, and I think dating is a perfect place to start because there isn't any attachment to that person at this stage, you're literally just practicing clear communication when necessary with somebody that you hardly know. And the more that you start to practice communication in a way that's not so abrasive and aggressive, but really just verbalizing who you are and showing that you expect respect, it really does start to attract the right person to you as well. And it brings in that opportunity for that deep emotional connection. And for me, in the beginning of this relationship, there was a couple of times where, I think, and this happens a lot with, well, in my experience with guys that I've dated, is they like to know where the line is.
I like to know without asking. I was like, we all
Yeah.
like to know without asking.
Yeah, there's like this, not even consciously, but like subconsciously just testing to see, because we always want to put people in a category, right? Like that's just what our innate is. It's like, okay, which category are they in? And I did this in the beginning. I was like, okay, so he's younger. Well, I could never date him because, he's young and he's very attractive and that would be too much hard work. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It was things where I was guilty of putting him into a category, but what was ultimately the most important thing for me was the ability to verbalize my boundaries and then seeing how that sat with somebody else. Does that create reactivity in somebody? Does that create a deeper connection with somebody? Does that change the way that they approach situations? And a huge contributor to why I wanted to explore this relationship was because there were some things where he would be a little bit cheeky and say something, and I would be like, we're all sexual beings and we all have these feelings and things that come up, but there's a time and a place, and it's about getting your confidence to start verbalizing boundaries and verbalizing what you will and won't accept. And when people see that, they go, oh, okay, well, that's not going to work. Or now I know where that line is, or now I know whether or not this person is going to potentially be somebody that I want to continue, and see where a relationship goes. And the best part about all of that was very quickly his trajectory changed. So like he was kind of going in this direction, then I'd say something and he'd go, okay, over here. And so then it would be very respectful and it would be very polite, and it never really got disrespectful. But it was just simply an opportunity for both of us to learn from an experience and go, I'm just trying to like feel it out. And then we go, okay, now I know where we are. Okay, cool. And then there would be another thing that might come up and be like,
Right.
no, that's not for me. I'm not a party person, or I don't go out, or, so it's like asking the questions and articulating what you want and what you don't want in a really soft way, not an abrasive way, is a great opportunity to practice this clear communication, to really practice early days so that you get really good at it, and then you can do it without having to overthink the words that you're going to use and, worry about it.
It's really important that we go back to what you said of, hey, we all love a little cheeky chat. But you're right, there's a time and a place. And one of my biggest philosophies is I can't be mad at somebody if I don't tell them that something bothers me. I feel like that's a completely unfair thing to do to your partner, to a coworker, to anybody. And so the fact that you were like, hey, not that I didn't like this, but I didn't like the way it was presented or whatever, says a lot. And like, you're right. Because as a fellow guy, I know this. I was like, if you give us an inch, we will definitely take 2 miles. We'll find the boundaries real quick. So sometimes we need a little gentle guiding, like, hey, don't go over there, don't play in that, because the EQ is not at where it should be at all the time.
Yeah, but I think as well, like when we're talking about that, there's the line. It's like, okay, he was saying something to me that was like indicating something of a sexual nature. I was still saying, look, I accept that. We're all sexual beings by all means. However, time and a place. And I think this is circling right back to the beginning, where we don't get taught how to communicate with people. And so a large part of what I work with clients on is actual scripts, like what actually we say that doesn't come across in an abrasive way, that's still saying, hey, I'm not opposed to intimacy and sex with you, or, where this relationship goes, but I'm articulating a boundary with you, it doesn't need to look like I'm not into intimacy or that I'm not open to it. It's just about being clear that this is the way in which you're going about it is not the right time or place.
Right. That's something that we all have to go through, myself included. Used to be like whenever, wherever when I was younger. And I have started to slowly learn that there is time and place for all conversations. There's also a tone. There are a lot of important factors when you're communicating with somebody who you're still courting, now, obviously, after you've been together for a while, you start to understand each other's playbook and you're like, okay, this is fine. I know when and when not to make whatever comment, to play around, to do whatever I do. That's the fun part. I was like, we do all this work in the early days that so when we're in a committed unit that we can just have fun, like you said. It shouldn't be something that's always cognizant. We should just kind of know. I was like, something's off with my partner. That's what dating should be. It shouldn't just be a long time guessing game.
No, that's the thing. It's got to be communication. And I think the word I love to bring back to, clients and for myself all the time is curiosity. And I think whilst we understand our partner on a deeper level and we're not in this no man's land when we're actually dating somebody, it's a serious relationship. What is super important is also to remain curious because we evolve and we change and we grow, and our preferences and what we like and what we don't like and what brings us pleasure evolves as we evolve. And to be curious with your partner and to ask curious questions is actually really beneficial to keep that chemistry going in the relationship, because you're showing, oh yeah, I already know this. You're showing, oh, okay, I'm still curious to know whether or not this is something you like, or maybe if you want something else. So it's like asking questions. And I know personally, I love being asked questions. That's why I love being a podcast guest. Yeah. So
I was like, that kind of walks me into where we were going next. Speaking of being curious, asking questions, I think everybody knows what time it is. I think it's time for a quickie. The quickie questions is just like a little icebreaker for us to get to know you better, not just as an expert, but just as a person. So don't think too hard about them. They're fun, they're light, but they do get a little more interesting as we go along. Okay. Alrighty. The first one, we're not going to go too hard. What is your favorite way to show intimacy to your partner?
quality time.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is my full and undivided attention in that moment, and asking questions and hearing what it is that that person requires. I think for me, that's that curiosity and quality time are two really big ways that you can hear your partner and listen to what it is that they would like. Yeah, I think that creates a deep level of intimacy.
I love that. Always being curious, that curious nature, or that even leads to spontaneity. Those two
Yeah.
go hand in hand most times. So the fact that that's something that you always keep at your forefront is amazing. I love that. Now, I mentioned this earlier, is no matter how well we think we have ourselves together, there's still that little part of us that needs work. And maybe you're a little farther along than I am, but I still have to ask it. Is there a trait that is like not the best? Maybe like a light red flag, but you were still kind of attracted to when you first met him?
Okay. So I listened to I knew this question was coming and I was like, I'm not going to prepare myself. And I was umming and ahhing about whether or not to share this. So this doesn't relate to my current partner. And this is not a light red flag. This is a very
Oh,
heavy,
it's deep. Okay.
very heavy red flag. Narcissism. And I don't say that lightly, but in the realm of a level of narcissism where I've often gone for partners where it's all about them. That was my normal. It was putting everyone else before myself. And so I would constantly go for people that it would be about them.
I was a bit of egocentric in my younger days. Last week, no. No. So I completely understand this, but I was like, I've also just never been the guy to just be too self-involved. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
confident in myself and my ability, but I just could not be the end all and be all. I was like, I'm interested in my partner. I was like, that's the whole purpose you're here. It's like not to
Yeah.
entertain me, but because I was curious, because I genuinely wanted to get to know somebody. So I completely get that. If I'm ever with somebody who is more into themselves than they are me, I think that's sign number like 12 that I should probably be exiting.
Yeah, I don't think it was genuine confidence either. It wasn't like I'm so full of myself and I feel so good. There was obviously like underlying feelings of insignificance, but it was just my curiosity led me to people that I wanted to understand them better and I wanted to learn more about them. And they, by me asking questions, which apparently not as many people do anymore, was actually really bringing this sense of, oh my gosh, and it was actually activating that need within them, which was somebody cares about me, somebody is showing interest in me. And so me being curious and asking lots of questions to somebody that was very self-absorbed was like, this is the perfect dynamic, because they were like, this person is curious about me and I get to talk about myself. But the problem with that was there's only so long I could tolerate it not being returned,
Yes.
and getting to a point where I was like, I'm certainly not somebody that's going to sit in the shadows. And when I started to get hints that that was the expectation of the role that I'd be playing in that relationship, I was like, not going to work, because it can't be one sided, because it just left me feeling very unhappy and unfulfilled and losing myself and losing my spark, which is what initially the whole attraction and relationship started with, is the spark that I brought to the dynamic. And now I'm so glad that I've acknowledged that that was a toxic trait
Yeah.
that I was playing out over and over again, so that now, it's not about just the other person. It's got to work both ways, where the curiosity flows between the two people.
And I mean, if you guys aren't watching, you're missing out because she's a bright star. She is a total like knockout is an understatement. So anybody who wouldn't be curious in her has to have more than a screw loose up there somewhere. But like I said, we are happy that you are in a spot now that you are with somebody who is just as curious and inquisitive about you as you are them. But the other side of my question would then be to you. We kind of talked about this earlier, but I want to see if your answer is the same. Is what do you think is your most dateable feature?
No, I sound like a broken record, but it's honestly my curiosity. I think it's my curious nature, it's my inquisitiveness, it's my outlook on life. I think, yeah.
That's different than what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say it was your humor again. I thought you were like, you were the funny one. I was like, I thought that's what she was going to say.
Yeah, true. That
Um,
too.
this one, I love it because it really speaks to, I think, the relationships that we have with other people. And the question is, what do you think is the best compliment that you've ever received?
I didn't give this one too much thought either. Biggest compliment. I can't remember the specific words, but it would be around inspiring a positive change in somebody. So my ability to be vulnerable impacts somebody's bravery or courage to make a positive change in their life.
Those always do hit the deepest when people are able to articulate just how much you've helped them grow or change. Especially as coaches, that's kind of our whole main shtick. So the fact that we ever get any of that feedback is just a huge testimonial to that.
Yeah, I think that for me, the biggest piece from that specifically was the vulnerability, because I think it's really difficult for most people to be vulnerable. And I think to be complimented on your vulnerability is like one of the most amazing compliments that you can get, because it's not easy to do that.
Last question that I have for you will probably lead us into our wrap up, but I think especially for somebody who does as much guessing as you, this whole thing can get monotonous at times. So, what's one question that you really wish somebody's asked you that hasn't yet? It's like you've talked
So
about a lot, but is there anything that like you really wish you're like, oh, I wish I could have talked about this in this episode, but I like you just didn't think about it?
Yeah, I think it ties into the last question. I think it's like being courageous. I think it's scary to open ourselves up to love. And I think that there's a piece of that puzzle that we haven't quite touched on is around being brave to be vulnerable, because that's where the connection grows and that's where the magic happens in a relationship is opening ourselves up to hurt and laying it all out on the table and showing up, being authentically you, and being okay with not being it being reciprocated. Because if you show up in authenticity and you show up in vulnerability and you show up as yourself, you inevitably are going to attract the right person. The wrong person won't want it and won't lean in, but you will start to attract the right people if you show up in authenticity. But that's not easy, and I think people need to give themselves a pat on the back, and feel proud if they are showing up that way.
It's not always a grand gesture. Sometimes it's the smallest thing that can start a journey or make the biggest impact. And so when you can just find a group of people or even a single person where you feel like you can really be your authentic self, it really just speaks volumes.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, guys, thank you so much for making it through this episode. I feel like this has been a really big trend the last couple episodes, and I think it's probably going to finish out the season this way. Is even though we're tired of being Hondas, and this year we're only doing Ferraris, okay? We're luxurious, pristine vehicles that anybody would be lucky to drive. I think it's also important to remember to take time to soften ourselves and really get to know what's on the inside. The shell that we project is important, but it has to be quality. It has to be protecting something quality underneath. So when we have episodes like this where we really get to soften and just be open, honest, and vulnerable with our guests, with each other, those just really warm my heart, and I think they're necessary, along with a little bit of cheeky chat that we throw in from time to time. But before we get out of here, Chloe, is there anything else you want to share with the audience? Anything big that's coming that you're working on right now?
Yeah, I'm actually launching my own podcast, which is exciting. Yeah, it's been something in the back burner for a while now. I'm going to be doing little bite-sized episodes, 3 per month, and then 1 guest interview podcast. So stay tuned. Who knows? You might see Joshua in that space. We'll see how we go. Yeah, so that podcast is coming soon in the next couple of weeks. The podcast name is Honey Ed Intimacy Made Easy. And for me, the importance of this podcast is that those 3 episodes that are solo episodes are all under 15 minutes, and they're very tangible tips that you can apply to your relationships and intimacy that are going to give you outcomes that we all want. And I know how busy everyone is with the to-do list. So for me, it's super important to keep that in mind, that we don't need to invest all the time in the world to make a relationship healthy and positive, that just a few little things here and there can make all the difference. Yeah, if you can jump over and give that a follow and a like and listen to a few episodes, give me some feedback, please. I would be so grateful.
Besides listening to our podcast, because I know you guys are already subscribed to it, because the Not So Bad crew, we are, if nothing else, lovers of other podcasts. Where can we find you if we want to work with you? If we're having, especially some of the ladies are having troubles with the low libido or just reconnecting with themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. A great place to start to see some of my content is Instagram, which is at thehoneyed.official on Instagram. And feel free to jump into my DMs, start a conversation with me. I would love to chat with you. Also, my website is honey-ed.com. And I've got some information on there around sessions that I offer. And you can send me an email via my website if you prefer.
Once again, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It's been another amazing episode of the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad. Don't forget to go over and show our guests some love. I don't know what side of the screen she's on for you guys. I'm going to leave all her links down below for the upcoming podcast, which will probably be airing by the time this airs, the website, the workshops, and I will see all you amazing people next week for another episode of the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad.